She paid for first class, but they moved her for a white man. What happened next shocked everyone. Danielle Monroe wasn't just another traveler trying to catch a flight. She was a woman on a mission, one that started well before she arrived at Gate 27B in New Orleans' Louis Armstrong Airport. With her tailored navy blue pantsuit, pristine white sneakers, and intricately braided updo that didn't shift an inch no matter how long the day dragged on, Danielle moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going, and had fought hard to earn the right to be there. She liked to be early. She needed that extra space before takeoff, to breathe, to focus, to center herself before stepping into the whirlwind that awaited in San Francisco. This wasn't just another conference trip. Danielle wasn't attending the Innovation Summit, she was opening it. The first speaker. The face they'd chosen to launch an event where every major tech executive would be watching. She had too much riding on this moment to leave anything to chance. When boarding was announced, she glided through the process with the calm assurance of someone who'd done this 100 times. Her first-class seat, 1A, by the window, was one she'd deliberately chosen. Not for the view. For the peace. The personal space. The small but significant feeling of control in a world that constantly tried to take it away from her. Her carry-on fit snugly in the overhead bin. She slid into her seat, exhaled, and felt the beginning of calm settle over her. She reached for her phone, preparing to review her notes one last time, when a flight attendant stepped into the aisle with a tight, professional smile and a tone polished to near condescension. "Miss Monroe?" the woman asked. Danielle looked up, already sensing something off. "Yes?" "I'm so sorry, but it seems there's been a mix-up with your seat." Danielle's brows furrowed. "I picked this seat when I booked." "I understand, and I do apologize, but another passenger has also been assigned to 1A. We're asking if you could relocate to seat 24C for now while we sort this out." Seat 24C. Danielle didn't need to ask. She already knew, middle seat, coach, by the lavatory. She'd flown enough to decode the language of polite shuffling. This wasn't a request. It was a dismissal wrapped in a smile. "I'd prefer to stay here while you work it out," she said, her voice steady, her tone polite but firm. The flight attendant's smile didn't waver. But there was steel behind it. "Unfortunately, we need to seat the other passenger immediately. He's a Platinum Plus elite member and has requested this seat specifically." Danielle turned just in time to see a man step onto the plane. White. Mid-50s. Confident. Entitled. The kind of man who didn't ask, he expected. And this airline, like so many others, seemed all too eager to accommodate. When power wears heels and braids. They had no idea who they just disrespected. He boarded with the ease of someone who'd never had to justify his presence. An expensive overcoat swayed with each step. AirPods already in. His eyes didn't flicker toward Danielle, not even a glance. He didn't need to acknowledge her. Men like him never did. Danielle didn't make a scene. That had never been her way. She didn't raise her voice, demand justice, or throw titles around. Instead, she reached silently into her blazer pocket, tapped her phone screen, and began recording. Her expression was unreadable as she gathered her things, lifted her bag with practiced grace, and walked the long stretch down to seat 24C. The man slid into 1A as if he had been born there, like he owned the sky. The flight attendant greeted him with a smile that was worlds apart from the one Danielle had received, warm, welcoming, familiar, the kind of smile that made you feel important, even if you didn't deserve it. Danielle sat down. Coach class, middle seat, squeezed between a teenage boy blaring music through oversized headphones and an older man with a rattling cough who didn't believe in covering his mouth. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Because 5 minutes later, the injustice of a seat switch would be the smallest problem this airline would face. You see, Danielle Monroe wasn't someone you shuffled to the back. She wasn't a mid-level employee hoping for an upgrade. She wasn't a VIP's assistant or someone riding coattails. Danielle was the founder and CEO of Foresight Logic, a cybersecurity firm that started in her one-bedroom apartment in Durham, North Carolina. 12 years of blood, sweat, and strategy had turned it into a tech powerhouse, one that had just been acquired for $480 million by Interglobe Holdings, the same conglomerate that owned SkyConnect Airlines. Yes, the very airline operating Flight 226, the one Danielle had just been booted to the back of. The layers of irony weren't lost on her. Just before boarding, Danielle had wrapped up a virtual meeting with Interglobe's COO, finalizing terms for Foresight Logic to take the lead on a massive security overhaul for SkyConnect's entire passenger data system. Her name had been on the calendar invite. Her voice had led the call. She wasn't just on their radar. She was helping run the system that powered their radar. But you wouldn't know any of that just by looking at her. And that is what had once bothered her most. Not the ignorance. The assumption. She'd sat in rooms where people directed their questions to her junior engineers, assuming they were in charge. She'd been offered hors d'oeuvres by hotel staff at conferences where she was the keynote speaker. She'd been mistaken for catering. For someone's assistant. For anyone but the woman signing the checks. Years ago, she'd tried correcting them. That time had passed. Now, she simply observed. She made mental notes. Quiet ones. Strategic ones. And she made one that day, as she sat in 24C with her legs crossed and her composure sharp-edged. The phone in her lap held the whole interaction. Clear audio. Clean visuals. The way the flight attendant's voice shifted. The subtle arrogance. The moment she referred to the white man behind Danielle as a priority customer. The refusal to even consider that Danielle, the black woman who had booked and paid for the seat, might matter more than his loyalty status. Danielle didn't need the footage for proof. She kept it for memory. For documentation. For the unspoken record she kept, a habit formed from years of collecting moments like this. Moments that weren't isolated incidents, but a pattern. A system. And now, this system had just messed with the wrong woman. You can't silence a storm when she owns the forecast. Danielle didn't press upload. She didn't need to. She wasn't the kind of woman who reacted for attention. The video on her phone wasn't about likes or outrage or hashtags. Danielle Monroe didn't need validation from strangers on the internet. She had real power, the kind that works quietly behind closed doors, until the moment it doesn't. Meanwhile, the man in seat 1A settled in with a glass of whiskey and a paperback, never even turned around. Never asked. Never looked. Danielle wondered if he had any idea what had just happened. Probably not. Men like him rarely needed the full story. The world tended to bend itself quietly into shape around their comfort. She didn't dwell. Her phone buzzed. A message from Tasha Brewster, her executive assistant, lit up the screen. Press kits live on the summit site. You're right at the top. Danielle tapped the link and saw it, her face, her title, her legacy. Opening remarks, Danielle Monroe, CEO of Foresight Logic, now in strategic partnership with Interglobe Holdings. A ghost of a smile tugged at her lips. She typed back. Great. Let's see if they know who I am now. Then, she opened her email, not to vent, not to seek sympathy. She composed a message that would do more than just make noise. It was addressed directly to Rhett Wallace, COO of Interglobe Holdings. No assistance. No filters. Straight to the top. Subject, Incident on Flight 226 SkyConnect Airlines. As the plane began to taxi, as the cabin dimmed and the jet engines roared to life, Danielle kept typing. Focused. Composed. Her elbows cramped between two strangers, one still coughing wetly into the aisle. She didn't flinch. She just moved her thumbs with the same clinical precision that had once patched a security flaw capable of leaking millions of identities. Earlier today, prior to departure on Flight 226, I was removed from my assigned seat in 1A without cause or proper explanation. A white male passenger was given the seat instead. I was relocated to economy despite having VIP status and a confirmed reservation. This is a matter of both policy and principle. I expect a response. No fluff. No emotion. Just facts with the force of firepower behind them. She hit send. It was Saturday. She didn't expect a reply right away. Most executives were off the grid on weekends. But Rhett Wallace wasn't most executives. Not when the company had just absorbed a cybersecurity division with full access to its digital bloodstream. Danielle's firm, Foresight Logic, wasn't just any acquisition. It was the acquisition. The one that had plugged the hole when SkyConnect's booking system nearly leaked 30 million passenger records into the hands of the dark web. It was Danielle's team that had found the breach. It was her protocols that patched it. It was her signature that prevented a PR disaster and a class action lawsuit from dragging SkyConnect's name through congressional hearings. And now, SkyConnect had just bumped her to coach, for someone with a shiny loyalty badge and a passport full of privilege. Danielle didn't need the world to see the video. She just needed the right person to read the email. And that was about to happen, 30,000 feet in the sky, while someone on the ground at Interglobe Holdings received a Saturday morning call that would turn an entire flight crew's day upside down. The seatbelt light blinked on. The plane tilted into ascent. Danielle Monroe kept her eyes forward. And the storm? It was coming. The shift in the sky, when power takes its seat. Now here she was, seat 24C, knees jammed, head tilted to avoid the flickering overhead light. Danielle Monroe sat in a space designed to confine and forget, watching the flight crew glide by with trays of snacks and plastic smiles, as if nothing had happened. But Danielle knew better. She always did. The lead flight attendant passed by again, her. The same woman who'd politely escorted Danielle out of her seat and into this cramped purgatory. Their eyes met. A flicker. A pause. "Is there anything I can get you, Miss Monroe?" Danielle didn't blink. "No, thank you." It wasn't hospitality. It was theater. The flight attendant had clearly recognized her name now, maybe from the manifest, maybe from a rushed whisper in the galley, or perhaps from that sudden email from corporate. But the script had changed too late. The damage was done. The curtain had already dropped on Act 1. 2 rows ahead, a teenage girl twisted in her seat, whispering to her mother. "That's the lady from the cyber conference posters." Danielle heard it. She didn't respond. Validation from strangers wasn't something she sought, but it confirmed one critical truth. Her name was known. Her face was visible. The airline just hadn't done its due diligence. Meanwhile, back in 1A, the man who'd displaced her had taken full ownership of the sky. Shoes off, seat reclined, mouth agape in sleep, as if the clouds themselves were his inheritance. Danielle closed her eyes. Not in rage, not in regret, but in calculation. Because Danielle believed something simple. When people show you who they are, believe them. The attendant had shown her. The airline had shown her. And now, it was time to show them what she could do. Before she could even make her next move, the first ping from corporate rattled the stillness of the cabin. Not loudly. Not with drama. It began with a whisper. A subtle shift. The lead flight attendant's demeanor changed mid-aisle, posture tight, eyes flitting nervously toward the front, then quickly down to the digital tablet clutched in her hands. Her throat moved with a slow, dry swallow, the kind that came with a warning she wasn't allowed to say out loud. Danielle noticed instantly. Then came the second sign. The intercom crackled, no words, no announcements. Just a static pop. Not the captain. Not turbulence. Not weather. Just movement. Whispers near the cockpit. Something had landed harder than the wheels on the runway. Danielle leaned back slightly in her cramped seat, gaze cool, knowing. The message had arrived. She tapped her phone. No reply from Rhett Wallace, yet. But a new text from Tasha, her assistant, lit up the screen. FYI, someone from Interglobe PR just called. They're asking if you're on flight 226. You good? Danielle replied without pause. Very. Back in first class, the man in 1A continued snoring, unaware that his recline was about to become the footnote in a corporate case study. He didn't know it yet, but the center of gravity on this flight had shifted, and it wasn't where the airline thought it was. The flight attendant returned again. Not gliding this time. Not smiling. Her walk was slower, her shoulders slightly hunched, her voice a hushed mix of apology and panic. Ms. Monroe, she said, leaning in. We've just, been notified that there was a significant error with the seating arrangement. We'd. She trailed off. The sentence unfinished, but Danielle already knew what came next. This wasn't customer service. This was damage control, mid-flight, 36,000 feet above sea level. And Danielle? She was just getting started. Altitude and consequence, the seat was just the beginning. We'd be happy to move you back to your original seat. It's open now. The words were quiet, offered like a peace treaty. But to Danielle Monroe, they arrived far too late. She looked up, calm as ever. Did the passenger leave? The flight attendant hesitated. He offered to switch. Danielle raised one eyebrow, sharp as a scalpel. Or was he told? Silence. The kind that confirms everything. Her tone didn't shift. It didn't need to. I'll stay here. You're sure? I'm sure. She didn't want the seat anymore. That seat had already told her everything she needed to know. Let the airline keep it. Let the weight of the moment sit in 1A where she no longer would. She wasn't looking for redemption. She was writing a record. But I do want something else, Danielle said, her voice still as smooth as glass. The flight attendant tensed, shifting. Of course. I'd like to speak to the captain. Before we land. The captain? The woman's voice cracked like a dropped tray. Yes. Let him know. The attendant nodded quickly, almost stumbling over herself. Of course. I'll relay the message. Danielle turned to the window. California wasn't far now. Around her, the cabin buzzed with unspoken curiosity. Passengers were picking up on it, the tension that didn't belong at this altitude. They couldn't hear the words, but they felt the change. The clipped conversations, the stiffened shoulders, the sudden silence of a once chatty crew. Something had gone wrong. Everyone knew it. They just didn't know how wrong yet. Danielle reopened the video on her phone. This time, she didn't wear headphones. She turned the volume up, not too loud, just enough for her neighbor to hear. Unfortunately, we need to seat the other passenger immediately. The voice of the lead flight attendant rang through the phone. Calm. Firm. Unapologetic. Danielle didn't glance at the woman beside her. She didn't have to. But someone across the aisle leaned closer and whispered. That's messed up. Danielle powered off the screen. But the ripple had already started. It moved through the cabin like electricity, faster than turbulence at 38,000 feet. Phones were still in airplane mode, but awareness travels without Wi-Fi. And down on the ground, in a conference room lit with blue LED screens and tension thicker than boardroom air, the real turbulence had already begun. Interglobe headquarters, Phoenix, Arizona. Rhett Wallace hadn't even finished reading Danielle's email when his phone rang again. Candace Berryman read the caller ID. Senior VP of PR. He answered without hesitation. We have a situation, she said, skipping all pleasantries. I'm already aware, Rhett replied, eyes narrowing. Not fully, Candace countered, voice clipped. It's circulating. Rhett sat up straighter. Her assistant posted a vague tweet, Candace continued. No names. No airline. Just a punchline that reads like a bomb. She read it aloud. Imagine building a company for 12 years. Selling it for $500 million. And still getting bumped from your first-class seat because you don't look the part. No hashtags. No company tags. Just a few dozen retweets, for now. But people were already connecting the dots. Candace exhaled. You know who she is. The kind of reach she has. This isn't just about optics anymore. Rhett looked out the window of the conference room. SkyConnect Airlines had always prided itself on modernization, but what happened at 30,000 feet had exposed a primitive reflex. A flaw no cybersecurity could patch. And now? Now they were facing a PR breach far more volatile than any data leak. Landing gear down, power rising. The replies were piling up. Is this Danielle Monroe? Wait, is this SkyConnect? Didn't they just announce a DEI partnership 2 months ago? What had started as a seating error was now a corporate disaster. Rhett Wallace didn't need to finish reading the thread to understand the stakes. He stood abruptly, cutting through the boardroom chatter. Get someone on the ground in San Francisco. I want a full report before wheels touch down, names, crew IDs, manifest logs, internal comms. Body cam footage, if it exists. Candace paused. Body cams? I don't care, Rhett snapped. I want everything. Back on flight 226. The cockpit door clicked open. For a moment, the cabin held its breath. The captain stepped into the aisle, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, posture rigid. He walked with the deliberate cadence of someone summoned to face a truth he couldn't sidestep. Stopping just short of row 24, he addressed her directly. Miss Monroe? Danielle didn't stand. She simply nodded. I've been informed of the error earlier in the flight, he said. I want to personally apologize. This does not reflect the standards we uphold. Danielle tilted her head slightly. You're the captain? Yes, ma'am. Then let me ask you something directly. He straightened. Of course. Would the same thing have happened if I looked like him? She gestured subtly toward 1A. The captain's jaw twitched. He didn't answer. Danielle nodded faintly. That's what I thought. The silence that followed wasn't confrontational. It was loaded. The weight of decades in one unanswered question. The captain took a breath. On behalf of the airline, I'm deeply sorry. Danielle turned to the window. Save it for your HR file. He nodded once and walked back. The passengers had heard enough. They didn't know every detail, but they understood something deeply wrong had happened, and they were watching a woman who wasn't letting it pass. As the wheels lowered for landing, the narrative wasn't in the crew's hands anymore. The control had shifted. Touchdown at SFO. The plane landed smoothly, but inside the cabin the tension remained. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins opened. Phones turned on like tiny truth beacons. Danielle didn't rush. She never did, especially not now. The man in 1A gathered his things and exited first. Still oblivious. Still unaware he'd been part of something larger than a seat assignment. Danielle rose last. Her steps down the jet bridge were measured, her back straight. At the gate, 2 men in dark suits were waiting. They wore no name tags, they didn't need to. The clipboard with the Interglobe corporate security emblem said everything. Ms. Monroe? The taller one asked. Yes. We've been instructed to escort you to the SkyConnect Executive Lounge. The COO would like to speak with you directly. Danielle gave a small nod. Now? Yes, ma'am. She walked with them calmly through Terminal 3. People turned. A few recognized her. One woman stopped in her tracks, lifted her phone, and captured a photo. Just like that, the story picked up another pair of wings. SkyConnect Executive Lounge. Rhett Wallace stood as Danielle entered, tall, clean-cut, tension carved into the lines of his expensive sweater. Danielle. Thank you for taking the time. Please, sit. She didn't. I'd like to begin with a formal apology. On behalf of Sky Connect. On behalf of Interglobe. And on behalf of myself. Danielle's expression didn't change. An apology doesn't fix a pattern, she said coolly. It patches a symptom. Rhett nodded. He'd expected this heat. We're launching a full internal review. The crew from your flight has already been suspended, pending termination. That decision's already in motion. Danielle raised an eyebrow. That fast? You were removed from a reserved seat, he said evenly. By a team that didn't follow protocol, didn't verify status, and didn't act with equity. There's no excuse. And if I didn't have your number, we'd still be waiting for your email, but we'd be reading it 6 hours from now on the front page of every outlet that tracks race and accountability. He didn't say it with panic. He said it like a man who understood. Visibility wasn't about intention anymore, it was about outcomes. What else? Danielle asked. Rhett took a breath. We'd like you to consider joining our internal review board. Equity and policy. Flight protocol. Hiring and training. Full access. No NDA. Danielle paused. Arms folded. Calculating. You want me to help fix what your company didn't even realize was broken? Yes. I'm not here to clean up your mess, Rhett, she said. I didn't build this system. He waited. But I'll tell you what I will do. He leaned forward slightly. I'll speak at your next leadership summit. On record. On stage. About this flight. About who gets seen and who gets silenced. About what it means when a black woman gets quietly moved to the back, and no one says a thing. Rhett's jaw tightened. But he nodded. Understood. And after that, she added, picking up her bag, I'll decide whether I want to help you fix it. She turned and walked out, stride steady, message delivered. Because some turbulence doesn't come from the sky. Some storms start on the ground, when silence is broken. The headlines came the next morning, not loud, not tabloid, but deliberate. Steady. Intentional. Written by journalists who had been watching Danielle Monroe for years, tracking not just what she built, but how she carried herself while building it. Black CEO removed from first-class seat for white passenger. Airline crew fired. Corporate shakeup underway. That was the headline. But that wasn't the story. Because the real story was never about the seat. It was about what happens when a person with power stays quiet long enough to be underestimated. Then chooses to speak with such clarity, such precision, that no one can look away. Danielle never released the video. She never had to. 2 weeks later, she stepped onto a stage at the Interglobe Leadership Summit in Phoenix, 400 executives in suits, every one of them expecting a statement. She gave them something else, stillness, presence, and the truth. No slides. No script. Just a wireless mic and the weight of the moment. She didn't yell. She didn't shame. She spoke like she was telling a story to neighbors, calm, composed, but unflinching. She walked them through that moment on Flight 226. The quiet ask. The flicker of discomfort on the attendant's face. The tone. The tight smile. The unspoken assumption behind it all. She spoke about what it feels like to be watched, always, by people who don't know they're watching, but are judging all the same. She spoke about building a company from scratch, while being mistaken for support staff. About walking into boardrooms that only start seeing you once your value is undeniable, and sometimes, not even then. And when she finished, she paused. Then said, "You don't have to mean harm to cause it. But once you see the harm, that's when the real test begins. What you do next, that's your character. That's your company." Silence. Then applause. Not polite. Not performative. But real. Heavy. grounded. Afterward, 3 regional directors approached her about overhauling training programs. One asked her to join their advisory board on hiring equity. Another invited her to consult on supplier diversity reform. Danielle didn't say yes to everything. But she didn't say no either. Because she knew, this was never just about her. It never had been. She hadn't been moved because someone didn't know who she was. She was moved because someone assumed she didn't belong. And that assumption cost people their jobs. Not because Danielle wanted revenge. But because, this time, the system bumped into someone who had receipts. A record. And reach. She wasn't angry anymore. She was focused. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. It was from a woman on the flight, a fellow passenger, who had watched the entire thing from a few rows away. It said, "You didn't say a word. And still, everyone heard you. Thank you." Danielle kept that letter. Not out of pride. Not to frame it. But to remind herself what this was really about. Not the seat. Not the applause. Not even the policy changes. But the people. The quiet ones. Watching. Wondering if they were alone. They weren't. And now they knew it. So if this story stirred something in you, made you think about the quiet ways harm shows up, ask yourself. When was the last time you saw something unfair, and stayed silent? Don't wait for someone louder. Don't wait for someone more qualified. Be the one. Say something. Do something. Because silence protects power. And power left unchecked? It always repeats itself. So speak. Stand. Even if your seat feels safe. Stand for the ones who can't.